Hello, everyone. My name is Will Wright, and I'm the Director of Government and Public Affairs for the Los Angeles chapter of the American Institute of Architects. And I am delighted to welcome to the conversation. We're going to have a presentation from both Maria and Jeff about, from a United Neighbors perspective, their organization. But right now, I'm delighted to welcome Casey Hughes and Tracy Stone, who are the co-chairs of the Government Outreach Committee. Casey and Tracy, do you want to start us off, and then we'll move over and have an introduction for Maria and Jeff?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Will. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I wanted to just briefly say is what we're planning to do this upcoming term for the GO Committee. We're working pretty much on two fronts. One would be policy, which this discussion falls under, and the other is good governance. So we've been digging in, trying to understand SB 9 and its implications. So we're really happy to have you guys here and get your perspective on it. And Tracy, the co-chair, she's been doing a lot of research into it as well. And I think, Tracy, do you have any comments now, or do you want to wait till after the presentation?
No, I just agree with you. I welcome everyone and look forward to the presentation and discussion tonight. And I think it looks like it will be an exciting year for the Government Outreach Committee. There's lots of things coming up, and so we're happy to have you all here, and welcome.
Thank you, Tracy and Casey. Well, so Maria and Jeff, we would love to have a 10, 15-minute presentation from you and then open it up to conversation. I'm trying to get everyone out of here by 7. And I also encourage everyone to introduce yourselves in the chat so we all know who's here. But Maria and Jeff, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Will. Jeff and I are delighted to be here tonight. Jeff is an architect, so we feel like we're home. We are founders of United Neighbors, a grassroots coalition that is statewide and represents hundreds of different socioeconomic neighborhoods. We took a strong stand against SB 9 and 10 because it neither increased affordable housing production, nor protected the stability of neighborhoods, nor prevented displacement and gentrification. We represent a lot of communities of color, and they see SB 9 as detrimental to their communities as redlining was. They see the stack and pack nature of SB 9 insulting. They want a backyard as much as anyone else and don't want to live on packed properties. With land values in communities of color more affordable, they have become the targets of upzoning and institutional and corporate buying. They have watched as areas get rezoned and a single house gets demolished and replaced by multiple units carrying price tags of $1.3 million per unit in their modest neighborhoods. SB 9 is a huge threat to these communities, and this is a photograph that Jeff and I took, and the image on the bottom is just a block from these little bungalows, and we actually toured these townhouses, which were starting at $1.3 million.
They're quite nice, but they're inappropriate for the neighborhood of people of color who are being forced out.
So we have plenty of capacity in our existing zoning to meet future population needs in Los Angeles, and opening up single-family neighborhoods solves nothing. Community plans should include housing in our commercial corridors that allow for apartments and townhouses and row houses and supportive housing. And with the state's help, we can make many of these units affordable. The use of public-owned property and conversion of unused commercial buildings are ways of adding housing without destroying neighborhoods. The state blames cities for not building enough affordable housing. We all know, however, that SB 9, we all know, however, that in 2011, the state ended redevelopment funding to cities to the tune of $1.3 billion annually. This was a city's major source of funding for affordable housing. One affordable housing developer told us that with the loss of this funding, 1 million units of affordable housing were not built during the past 10 years. That is a staggering amount of housing for the state to have prevented. We see a huge threat to affordable housing, gentrification, and displacement from institutional and private equity money, investing in single-family housing for rental purposes, turning housing into an asset class that produces huge profits for corporations. SB 9 exacerbates this problem. At one time, homes were sold based on what people could pay. Too many unsold houses meant prices came down. Today, to buy a home, an individual's wages are competing against non-wage capital from corporations with bags of cash to buy up housing. With cash offers, these corporations outbid individuals, causing housing prices to stay high and individual home ownership to drop. People are being priced out of the market. Investors purchased $64 billion worth of homes. That amounts to 90,000 homes in just the third quarter of 2021. And they are just getting started because real estate as an asset is lucrative. SB 9 has given these investors the ability to double and triple the value of their present and future holdings. In the big picture, SB 9 is a huge win for investors, not homeowners, as Senator Atkins likes to portray. The buying up of homes for investment is a global problem. Canada, Spain, Britain, Australia, South Korea have all been alarmed at the loss of housing stock to investors that has led to homelessness and lack of affordable housing in their countries, just like we face in California. But these governments have started passing legislation to curb the corporate investor. Countries have placed huge vacancy taxes on vacant, corporate-owned housing, and some have threatened eminent domain if they remain vacant. Restrictions on how much housing can be owned by investors has been approved in Berlin, while Canada has stopped institutional foreign investment in housing for 2 years. And in Canada, they have a recent statistic showed 18 homes per person. So even with a huge supply, their prices are soaring. In the US, states like Tennessee and Georgia have seen whole blocks of neighborhoods purchased by institutions, causing housing to become too expensive for people to stay in their old communities. In LA, 60% of our residential units are owned by institutions and 90,000 units are vacant in a city with 60,000 homeless. Instead of our state government controlling the speculative market, they passed SB 9 and 10 that deregulate single-family parcels, making them even more lucrative for land speculators to buy homes for rental purposes. In hopes of tempering the harmful provision of SB 9, our group formed a subcommittee made up of talented former city planners and an attorney, and we wrote the motion that was presented to Council Member Koretz. We circulated it statewide for other cities to use as guidelines to implementing SB 9. Our purpose was not to stop 9, but to make sure that we put some constraints allowed by the law to temper the institutional buyer's appetite for using housing for investment purposes. In writing up the motion, we wanted an affordable covenant provision so that one unit on a lot split could be deed restricted, but we were not allowed to put it in because it wasn't in the bill, even though Senator Atkins made a big point in her presentations at committee hearings that everybody could do 1, 2, 3, or all 4 units affordable. We also asked for an occupancy requirement of 3 years to be issued at the time of a certificate of occupancy was granted But we did not get that granted, that to be done during, after the certificate of occupancy was granted. We wanted objective zoning standards that would still allow homeowners some flexibility while maintaining compatibility with the neighborhood. And we also wanted to strengthen urban canopy protections. And we see our friend Angelinos for Trees is trying to add a strong environmental protection to that motion. We made compromises in order to win consensus with the many LA City Council offices we were working with. But many of them still believe that more housing will trickle down and produce affordable housing. We must remember that the private market has no reason to build more housing in order to bring prices down. That is not a business model they work with. They will never oversupply if they don't have the demand. We are now waiting for the Planning Department's memorandum for the implementation of SB 9 this week, and are told the City Council will take up the motion soon. Our group will continue working to add affordable housing everywhere. Increase in density is inevitable. Affordable and equitable housing is our goal, while designing our communities to be greener, more walkable, and enjoyable places to live. As architects, you can visualize a more enhanced living environment offered through proper development. SB 9 destabilizes communities. These new corporate landlords are not interested in communities, but in the land value they bring to their portfolios. We can't allow them to determine the look of our communities. That is what architects and planners should be doing. Jeff has an 85-page study on affordable housing that we use while speaking to our state and local legislators. And we have scheduled a roundtable discussion with our senators to see if we can pass legislation that will curb speculative buying in our neighborhoods, add an equitable and affordable housing while also submitting ideas to amend SB 9. We hope that the AIA will be a strong voice for our communities, and we certainly look forward to continuing a nice relationship with you. So that's our presentation, Will.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate all the work and effort you and your and Jeff and your organization are putting together. We have the Government Outreach Committee that is led by Tracy and Casey, and we've been doing a lot of research on SB 9. So, Tracy Stone, would you like to share a few of your findings with regards to how this might impact Los Angeles?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Maria and Jeff. That was very thorough, and you brought up a lot of really interesting points, I think. And I certainly agree with you that the fact that the state has cut funding for affordable housing has been a real problem, I think, for us. And it's exciting to think that there might be enough money now to redirect some of that back into housing. So I have had a lot of people approach me about whether or not SB 9 would work for their lot. And in looking at some of the current zoning code requirements that are in our current zoning code that would continue to apply, there are significant barriers, I think, in that zoning code that will make it very difficult for SB 9 to be used on the majority of our residential lots. And I have some diagrams that I'm happy to share just to review a few of them so people understand what some of the difficulties will be. And so I personally think that, we're immediately out of the block. This is probably only going to apply to 20–25% of residential lots in Los Angeles. And for the following reason, I can share this briefly. These are a few of the lots that people had approached me about, and it's kind of interesting to see. For example, this is a very large lot in the valley. It's 77 feet wide and it's 296 feet deep, and it has a single family house on it, And it has a 3-car garage, and this is entirely vacant at the back. It has no alley. And it seems like, in my opinion, sure, why not add another unit, a house perhaps, to the rear? But in fact, there are a number of code issues that will prevent this lot from actually being split in this way, which is the only way to do it without destroying the existing single family home, and the homeowners don't want to have that destroyed. So they have a less than 10-foot side yard setback, which means that the current passageway requirement to the front door of any residential unit cannot be met. They don't have the ability to have a 20-foot lot frontage up here. So this would not be a legal lot per the current zoning code. There is no way to get parking or a driveway for this. Current codes prohibit an accessory structure from being a detached one from being in the front half of the lot unless it's a hillside. So there are quite a few things that would prohibit this very large lot with a house on it from being developed unless the house was torn down. And it is my understanding that there are a number of protections in SB 9 that actually make it somewhat difficult to do that. This is a typical infill lot, which is again 50 feet wide. And the only way to subdivide this in order to meet the frontage requirements is to subdivide it lengthwise. But that actually poses a whole slew of other problems, namely the parking. Paving the driveway to a 2-car garage or parking scenario, which is what would be required, violates immediately the prohibition about the percentage of landscaping in the front yard. Obviously, the lots get very narrow, and currently the intention is on the part of the city to require a 4-foot internal side yard setback as well as the external one. So you have a 25-foot wide lot minus 8 feet, and you suddenly get something that's very difficult to build on and is certainly can't accommodate cars. So you start to have an issue where you're not parking in a private garage any longer, which is also one of the requirements of R1. So there are all kinds of issues here that get very tricky. This is a corner lot, which seems like one of the few types of lots that actually could be subdivided using SB 9. But it also raises an issue if you were to cut off the garage, which this would do on this particular lot. That means that the parking then starts to happen in the front of the lot. And right now they intend to require that the parking happen in a private garage, as is currently required by code. So where do you put a private garage that doesn't wipe out all of the windows on the existing house? So it seemed to me, based on my review and the current zoning codes, that this is currently not an ordinance that is going to actually apply to too many lots. And I'll stop sharing at that point. I kind of zoomed around there a lot, but I think that there's a lot to be done to this ordinance if indeed it is to be used in the way that it was intended. And it may make Maria and Jeff feel better that there are a lot of prohibition, a lot of barriers basically to this ordinance right now.
Well, Tracy, if we may, in our studies, we found that this plays to the developer, not to the homeowner. If you demolish the house, which in a typical 7,500 square foot lot, which is a typical lot size in California, we know they go down to 5,000 square feet, but in a typical lot, the house is right in the middle. You're going to have to demolish the house. You're going to have to split it in the longitudinal way and try to get your units in the way you showed it. And the front yard paving is going to have to be something that the city is going to have to come to grips with.
Yeah, but they're not intending to right now. I mean, their intention right now is to continue to apply all of the zoning code regulations that are not specifically overridden by SB 9 to these projects. So if you have an alley in the back, that seems to me to be the only time when that longitudinal split might work, because you can park from the rear and meet the frontage requirements along the front. I mean, we'll see. I'm sure that there are other minds that are looking at this as well, and maybe there are other solutions.
Your example of the corner lot, the short end of the block lot, is the excellent example. That's by far the best example, because now you have very simple access. You can put smaller houses there on smaller properties and have something that will be less expensive than the surrounding properties.
You know, I think what's interesting, you know, I read your proposal. It was, you know, distributed. It was presented to the city council, and I think, you know, a lot of your points are well taken. Like, you know, if we can agree that this isn't, you know, that it doesn't serve any of our interests to have big institutional investors dominate the residential. I mean, even if you're pro-development and you're pro-building a lot more housing and you're pro the philosophy of SB 9, it doesn't serve affordable housing advocates. It doesn't serve anybody to have this dominated, to set it up in such a way that it's dominated by institutional investors. And so I think your point, Tracy and Marianne Jeff, that we need to noodle with it. First of all, we need to require people to live there for 3 years. I thought that was very intelligent personally. And Tracy, I know that the ADU ordinance, the state ADU ordinance, avoided the passageway, the 10-foot passageway requirement. And so it seems to me that's a simple fix. What we're trying to do is allow people to keep the homes that are in place, if they're not completely poorly sited, to be able to take advantage of this in a logical way that helps the neighborhood, but allows them to keep their home. And maybe this actually helps them stay in their home, right, as they get older, you know, all of those things that are good things for the city and good things for affordability. So anyways, I would say that maybe some of the things that Tracy pointed out should get combined with the suggestions and the proposal to the Plum Committee.
Thank you, Hava. Michael Anderson, we have Michael on the call, and Michael, did you want to share some of your insight, because you've been working on this for a number of years as well?
Sure. Well, first of all, I do support, and I'm glad to hear you say about the big institutional investors, because they do sort of gobble up property, hold it, they have the staying power, and then tend to develop it in something that does displace culture. But Maria and Jeff, I've been working on projects in our communities for like 40 years for CRA and stuff. And right now, we're really sort of looking at using a lot of the solutions that came out of the low-rise design competition to help Black and brown families have a home plus 3 income units, and basically make a new type of model and housing that fits into the urban grid, especially in Black and brown communities. And currently, I'm in the process of lobbying for the government to make amends to Black and brown families, where we do a courtyard housing, with early version of California housing, where it's the owner's unit, maybe 3 bedrooms and 2 baths being rented out to a family member or friend, and then 2 one-bedroom units rented out, where the federal government gives them about $500,000 in equity to make it a low-cost home ownership that helps build generational wealth. I think I've came to that conclusion over years of seeing what works and what hasn't worked. I did build some townhomes before in Leimert Park after the riots, and they sold for $154. I negotiated $54 in grants. The people paid like $800 a month. Now they're worth $650. I wish it had been a home plus income property, because then when a person wants to pull out equity, you're pulling it out of the income units and not your house. The other thing is looking at doing that is remodeling mom's house, who may be a single family house in South Los Angeles, who can't afford to make the investment to upgrades, is for them to get about 100 to 200,000 in equity and make that a courtyard housing where the children and grandchildren can live on the same lot with mom, because that has a social profit to it. Because one of the things, if you're in a single family home, the kids live out in Corona because that's where they can afford to purchase someplace or maybe rent. They don't see their parents until church maybe, or maybe a holiday. And so the other purpose is to grow the average household incomes, because in these communities where you showed fixing up the commercial corridors, that happens by increasing the average household income to a point where Trader Joe's wants to come into the communities. When I do these studies, people say in the 90s, I want Starbucks. Now they say Trader Joe's, but what they're really saying is we want the quality of life where we see Trader Joe's and Starbucks in. So you have to create an economic chemistry that makes that happen, that's mutually beneficial to everyone, that nurtures replenishing the culture, where the kids come back to the community because they have a higher income than mom because they're the current workforce. At the same time, their culture will come to the commercial corridors to mix in with the existing buildings. And then you have a layering process like Melrose went through in the 80s, but in this case, it's the 21st century version, where you mix old and new, and that creates a vibrancy that makes people from outside the community come to the community, but also makes the kids' culture on the boulevard. And so that's, as Will was saying, that's the strategy that we've been nurturing over the last year and a half to make that possible. We need affordable housing, but in Black and brown communities, it really becomes a low income impaction equation, because you're putting seniors who need residence, and they do need a better place to live, but you're compiling low income units on top of where a single family house used to exist. And so now we can do a better solution that works in everybody's interest to have affordable housing in large unit buildings, 100 units or something, but also courtyard housing to make a new housing type for LA. And LA is a successful county nationally, it's like a nation, well, county state, So if we look at Singapore, how they were successful in terms of making home ownership an asset, they now have the second highest per capita income in the world. They have low corporate taxes, and they have like 900 people homeless, which are typically immigrants. But I see, when I see homeless, I see more Black people, because that's, it seems like that to me. And I don't know who's doing the math. I count way more than 60,000, but maybe that's just, my numbers are wrong. But I see those as children who cannot afford a place to live. And, mom doesn't have space to rent to them. But if we make courtyard fourplex housing, then they can rent units. It's the government making amends to correct it, but making it a business strategy also combined with urban design that fuels additional investments in a way. And then we can leverage street beautification projects. Because I really look at it like the modernization of LA, the parts that are underdeveloped. If you look at it like LAX is doing a modernization program, we're looking at going to private capital sources to make that happen. And I'm negotiating right now with the county to let us do a prototype project where the county development authority, we basically make agreements with landowners and acquire a lot of land and work with the community land trust. You have Trust South LA and all these other organizations that have the momentum, but they don't have the capital, or they don't have the professional services. So as Will didn't say this, but I'm sort of saying, we're assembling a team of professional services and capital that in the end makes home ownership possible for Black and brown people around the transit stations, so that when you ride the A line, you don't feel uncomfortable going through Compton, Watts, Willowbrook, because we're targeting that culture to come back through home ownership. And I think everybody's going to be hot to own a home, and the government should make amends. And then the banks are already on board. I've met with the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank twice, in terms of, that's the bank cartel. I used to think it was something different, but it's like bank cartel. But I think if we do something like that, that's united, it would address your concerns, and your concerns are valid. The lot that Tracy showed, no, you can't divide it in two and get a car in the back, but that's in the valley. But the urban context of the grid system in South Los Angeles, they have alleys. We can beautify alleys to become play yards for kids, instead of putting those metal gates, put remote control gates on so everybody can open it up easily. We're making playgrounds for kids, since the backyards back up to each other. So that's kind of the gist of what we're working on. Will and them, the government outreach people, Tony and them have been very helpful to me. And you should hear more, because right now we can have a powerful study done by McKinsey and Company, just to show what the economic impact will be on Los Angeles County. And I believe, it adds up to a $120 billion strategy. The government puts up $30 billion. We're lobbying for $5 billion for Metro's West Santa Ana branch corridor, because that Hispanic community doesn't have public transit that connects up to the other public transit lines. And so it's a whole strategy to get the politics and take advantage of what Biden, he's got to do something, you know, he's under pressure. Maybe he'll say, let me do something in LA. So Will, I'm sorry to take up so much time. But
No worries, Michael. Maybe we could do a deeper dive presentation on the initiative you're leading. Daniel is next in queue. Daniel, welcome to the conversation.
Will, can we
yes.
use it for a second? What Michael said is brilliant. His concept is brilliant. But the important thing is that it is local. It's not a state one-size-fits-all type of law. And Maria and I have given over 70 town halls up and down the state. And in every community, no matter what size their parcels, even the communities that have 1 acre minimum size parcels, they all want to do similar to what Michael's talking about. They want to be able to get what they would call starter homes to get their children able to come back and live in their communities. So what Michael says is brilliant, but it needs to work locally.
And I think to one other point, their biggest fear, the people we've talked to, is that it's going to be developers that buy these properties and split them and add as many units as they can and put renters there. And therefore, you're not adding home ownership to these areas, but you're adding more rentals and they're owned corporately. And a lot of the people we've talked to have said they've already gotten calls on sell your house, and their children have gotten calls saying your parents have a house, maybe they need to get rid of it. So it's, you know, we like what you're talking about, Michael. We're just concerned about the monies that are waiting to land in these communities.
Thank you. Daniel, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Will. Wow, I'll try to follow that. Michael, good to see you. Love everything that you're talking about. My firm actually was in the mayor's low-rise competition in the fourplex category, and we took 3rd place in that category. And we took an actual homeowner from East LA and transplanted her site to LA in order to meet the criteria of the competition. This is a 92-year-old Latina woman who lives in a neighborhood that's populated by her children, cousins, nephews, whatever extended family, and they are in all the building trades. And so we conjured a scenario by which a social investment type of lender was prepared to go in and help Tia Rosa, that's what we called her, with her property because she was property rich and cash poor, in order to pull out sufficient money to redevelop her lot in order to create exactly what Michael said, which was housing for her children and her children's children and other members of her extended family. And I think that this potentiality is overlooked a lot when people express their distress about SB 9 and what it can do. When we were working through this and talking to people, they said, this would be so awesome. This would give me a chance to stay in my neighborhood, not to leave my neighborhood, to stay in my neighborhood. And I'm just very concerned that we overlook that sort of practical thing. Now, to everyone's credit, it's like, absolutely. And I'm an architect too, and I'm getting calls on this. And I know that investors are very interested in doing this. And just incidentally, I live in Orange County, and in Newport Beach, there are also many property owners who are cash poor and house and property rich. Just fewer properties that loan themselves to being split or redeveloped or whatever. I will say this: we did a lot of studies in my firm. Will, thank you very much, posted a link to some of the work that we did that demonstrates what we think is the minimum lot size to be able to be split and developed in California. And it's generally big lots, anywhere from big to really big. I think it's interesting to consider that. Anyway, I want to say that I agree that in many cases, this is extremely attractive to investors. And those of you who are watching HGTV have probably watched Flip or Flop for years and understand that small investors, big investors, other people know how to make money from real estate. And it's something that it's kind of I don't know that we want to eliminate that as a possibility, because I think some of those efforts can actually promote what we're trying to do. And the thing I'm hoping for, Michael, is the magic sauce of a local lender who will come in and provide capital to these existing people of color homeowners who are cash poor, property rich, so that they can do this sort of thing and keep their children from having to move to Chino or IE or Central Valley.
Thanks, Daniel. So we'll go to Isabel next, and then I see we have Rick Corsini, and then Michael, you have your hand up as well. So Isabel, welcome.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So there's a couple other members of CFAC on this call. My name is Isabel Duvivier. Many of you know me. I'm a fellow of the AIA, and I'm a longtime tree advocate. CFAC, the Community Forest Advisory Committee, were appointed by our council districts and were nominated by the council district and appointed by the mayor's office. We oversee the city's canopy, so we have a really great insight. And what we've seen over the last 20 years is a decrease in tree canopy between 20 and 55%, depending on what neighborhood you live in. 90% of our tree canopy is on private property. So that is the area where we're really the most concerned. So we have added an amendment to the Kretz motion, which is this document that's before you, where we would suggest that if this were to pass, and it seems as though the council offices aren't really predisposed towards this. I mean, they voted against SB 9 months ago, and they're dragging their feet on it now. But if they were to vote on some kind of motion with SB 9 and jump through all the hoops that Tracy so eloquently described, we would hope that we could do some kind of step back requirement for trees. The step back is different than a setback. It's the way the city of Santa Monica phrases the second story step back for their larger buildings to protect adjacent properties from mansionization. And the idea here is that a tree cannot survive in a 4-foot side yard setback. So as much as Maria and Jeff's motion or resolution would be advantageous to us to no setback, a 4-foot setback would not allow you to actually plant or keep any of the existing trees. So we are hoping that we could add to that resolution this 8% step back for trees, and it would be 1 tree per unit. So if you had 4 units on a lot, you would be required to have a step back for 4 trees. 1 could be in the front yard, or 2 could be in the front yard. So this is an idea. We're floating it around. We're happy to talk to you. We looked at 8%, we looked at 20%, we looked at 2%, we looked at a variety of percentages, but really, if you want to have a tree, you need at least a 10 by 10 foot area. And the rest of my team, did I miss anything that we needed to add? I kind of jumped through this really quickly.
Hi, this is Shelley. I would just add, I'm also the chair of CFAC, and our thinking has to do with the fact that especially disadvantaged communities, Black and brown communities, already suffer from shade inequity. And there is very little tree canopy that's not just for aesthetics, but for ambient cooling, for lowering electric costs. Evotranspiration, contributes to the cooling, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're concerned that even with this current resolution that says up to a 4-foot setback, really any of the mature trees already on these lots and the neighborhoods are going to be completely eliminated. The other point to this is that Los Angeles region is a biodiversity hotspot, and climate change and loss of biodiversity go hand in hand. So again, this is a, perhaps unintended consequence, but no less an alarming consequence of developing every square foot of every lot.
And additionally, over 50% of Angelenos are not within walking distance to a park. And so where the backyard has always been a place where people can have green space and trees and shade, that's being taken away, particularly in underserved communities. and where they don't already have green space or park space. And this would allow sort of the idea of requiring trees on private property and requiring shade and green space. However small, but it would be material.
Thank you so much. I added the link to CFAC for everyone who may not be aware of the Community Forest Advisory Committee, and which is part of the Department of Public Works. Rick Corsini, you're next. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. I was I'm very impressed with all the level of conversation here. I think some really critical and salient points are being made, and I think that the points that Jeff and Maria make in their presentation and with the legislative proposals that they are talking about, there are some very important concerns that they are addressing, and I think it's something that we all need to note. That SB 9 and SB 10 may not fully address as thoroughly as need to be for the intent of providing tools for communities to build more affordable housing for themselves, right? I think the concern over institutional investors is a really critical thing that desperately needs to be addressed. And if it's not addressed by an amendment at the state level, it certainly should be addressed at the local level. With that said, we have to also understand that the temptation in many local jurisdictions, maybe not so much in LA in certain neighborhoods, maybe more so in others, but certainly in many other jurisdictions, you can basically, as Tracy so clearly demonstrated, certain rule changes can invalidate the entire initiative. And I think it's important to understand that rules that require certain types of setbacks and clearances, and even trees, which we all want on our sites, can have the ultimate effect of preventing the entire endeavor and prevent the intention of the legislation. I think that what's important for all of us to recognize, and certainly the opponents of SB 9 need to recognize, is that zoning has been the primary obstacle for the development of more affordable housing statewide, in fact, nationwide. And specifically, R1 zoning has been the tool of segregation and racial discrimination. And that needs to be clearly acknowledged to have a reasonable conversation about these issues. And I think that the idea of creating rules or adding rules to SB 9 and SB 10 that will encourage homeowners to keep their homes, and certainly in Black and Brown communities to be able to build wealth within those communities, that should be the clear intention of SB 9. And to the degree that issues that could undermine those intentions are not addressed, that's where this local control needs to be implementing rules that will keep that from happening.
Thanks, Rick. Michael, you have your hand raised. Did you want to add a?
Yeah, I'll just say the last thing. So everything that even just what Rick said is so true. But first I want to acknowledge that Danielle's remodel of the mom's house was the example we used in terms of this funding. But the overall strategy is what happens is when neighbors starts to change as speculators come in, just like Jeff and Maria were talking about, and even institutions, and buy up all the property for larger investments down the line. That's what happened with CIM buying property along Adams and Jefferson Boulevard. The purpose that we're going this direction is to direct large capital sources where our team serves as the modernization entity in the interest of the community. Because there's a lot of things that have to happen simultaneously to offset the speculation and also make the tangible results that are needed to make the community's transformation, such as put in mature trees, but also use the investments to leverage where metro funds can be attracted to the area for streetscape projects, because we're concentrating private capital into the area. At the same time, doing it at a large scale where the cities and counties own such a large amount of property that it's just sitting there dormant. But we're looking at a strategy that then has to spiral up and impact the building departments to be able to upgrade themselves to handle the capacity. So it really becomes a leveraging of one element to the other. The $35 billion ask is to create the competition to capture the money. Because by doing that, I did the sound installation for LAWA. You start to make people say, I want the $500,000. The cities will start to say, I want it. We're targeting the County of Los Angeles and Southeast Los Angeles and South Los Angeles specifically. That's all this does is the 1st, 2nd, and 4th district of LA County. Because the county can make decisions faster than municipalities tend to. And then once they start entitling sites faster and we build the products, cities will start to say, how do I get the product, right? And so you're just trying to create the human behavior, design the behavior to make the products, but we need a lot of the products. And in the end, you get 300,000 units added to these communities. It's about 2,800 units around each transit station. It's 18 stations. But that's how you modernize the parts of LA that are not attractive and make them walkable, make them great places, reduce crime, create revenues necessary. And it's a whole economic strategy that we have to do. The Band-Aids I've seen haven't worked. And when we do it piecemeal, we never get to the utopia it can be. I've watched this since the riots. They blew that opportunity. And so that's why I created it. Anyway, I'll stop there, but I would love to share with everyone because everybody's support is needed. It's only for LA County. This can't be applied to every part of the county. It's California. It can work in certain other urban areas, but this is designed specifically for Southeast and South Los Angeles. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Michael. Anyone else on the call, we look forward to hearing your comments. Please let me know. Maybe we'll go back to Tracy Stone. Tracy, what do you recommend for next steps? And then how do we really make sure we're integrating some of the concerns that we heard from everybody?
Well, I think it's important that we all play a role in and have a voice in the implementation ordinance. And I may have misunderstood this, Will, but I thought that there was going to be an initial memo that basically says, this is how it's going to go forward right now. But then they're going to take a look at some of these other zoning code issues and make a determination about areas that are not specifically covered by SB 9 or how they might interpret SB 9 with respect to our current zoning code. So I think that's what's happening. And if so, I think it's really important that we all have a voice and a say in that process to make sure that we craft the best use of this state ordinance that we can, that begins to address all of these different thoughts and concerns.
Thank you, Tracy. Michael, if you have a moment, Michael Rosen, you have an idea that I think will really be helpful, and I would love to integrate your comments into this conversation.
Yeah, so we have all these great ideas from architects and from advocates and community, like Michael, who's been working in coming up with great plans with multi-generational solutions. But we realize that it's possible with this ordinance to actually have an engineer hired by a developer just go and do the projects, buy up the property and do it, but not even anyone on this call, no architect, signing the drawings or having anything to do with the design. So you can imagine, and not care about the trees, not even unless the city had, a box that they checked that required that. So I just wanted to make that point that basically the engineer can actually sign drawings that have 3 to 4 units based on the state law. So we would like to have that provision actually included so that it requires an architect. So that's in summary what we were requesting.
Thanks, Michael. And I included Michael's comments in the most recent edition of the advocacy report, where I think if we could advocate that SB 9 projects require an architect's stamp, I think that would be a move in the positive direction. Siobhan, oh, Paul, you just raised your hand. Welcome to the conversation.
Okay, I just unmuted. Thank you, Will. Yeah, no, I am not entirely familiar with the provisions of SB 9, but did look at the resolution, which made a lot of sense. And it certainly, I think, is informative to look at the mechanics of applying the zone, such as Tracy did. And I think that really answers a lot of the questions in terms of how applicable this will be, and how there are other constraints, and it's really larger lots that this would apply to, maybe in some of the more, and certainly would apply to a lot of the more suburban exclusive communities that are the result of a lot of housing exclusivity. But a question that I have is in the resolution, and I think it comes from the statute, that an owner of the property or the applicant for the subdivision or the multiple units on the lot has to live there for 3 years. And it seems to me, or I'm assuming, that that was specifically provided in the statute so as to avoid the potential for speculation and institutional investment in buying up properties and having adverse neighborhood changes as a result of that. Am I missing something? Isn't that a specific part of the ordinance, of the legislation? And that's the first question. Second thing is, I think in light of the analysis and looking at it realistically in terms of what's possible, I see a lot of panic reaction by cities. In fact, there's a movement among many cities in LA County, a kind of a knee-jerk panic reaction to this, to get some kind of an initiative on the ballot to counteract SB 9. And so I think there's fear mongering going on out there, which is unwarranted, particularly when we look at what the actual impacts and potential of this are. And I think that's something maybe that the AIA could shed some light on. But anyway, that's a comment. Back to the question: doesn't the requirement for the applicant to live on the property in one of the units for 3 years isn't that an antidote or a prevention of the wide scale the speculative potential of SB 9?
Good question, Paul. Maria and Jeff, do you have any comments on that? And then we'll go to Daniel and then Rick Corsini.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We don't think there's any teeth to that part of the provision, because we were telling them that if a buyer is an investor who wrecks the house, how do you establish residency? And the residency requirement, the occupancy requirement, is based on the moment a lot split is granted. And that could take 2 years before you actually build on it. And how do you establish that? So and on top of that, the city has no way of following who lives where. So our only hope was in putting it as a requirement that residency occurs the moment the certificate of occupancy was granted, but we did not get that. But I think if you have it that way, then you at least have built it and you have to live on it, and then you might get away with removing some investors.
Thank you. Daniel, you had some comments to add?
Yeah, if you have a chance to click the link and watch the presentation I did with a couple of other people a couple of months back, I'm just going to say this without taking a position anywhere, is there are developers who have a financing system by which they have a shared equity arrangement with property owners, such that the property owners retain title to the property and the investor invests a bunch of cash so they can do the sort of situation I was describing earlier. And that, like it or not, is a way around the resident occupancy provision, because the original property owner retains title to the property for the 3 years, and then they can be out with the rest of their equity acquired from the investor and move on that way. So yeah, I agree that was not a watertight sort of correction, but it will, again, I think that particular aspect of it could benefit a lot of existing current homeowners.
Thanks, Daniel. Rick.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what everyone is saying. I was just going to say, look, there's no real mechanism written into the Senate bill other than stipulation that there be an affidavit signed for this, and in terms of ownership for 3 years. So it seems one of the key focuses for amending SB 9 has to be finding ways to make that more watertight. That I think if it's 3 years or 5 years or whatever that makes this undesirable for institutional investors, that would be a really super important way to focus at the local level, if not at the state level. It probably needs to be amended at the state level, you know, with a thorough analysis of
We got a
the
couple
potential works
shots.
around.
Now they're all talking trees, which is all we need to know.
Hello?
Um,
Okay, that's it.
Thanks, Rick. Well, we only have a few more minutes. I encourage anyone that has any additional comments to share some last thoughts. While I'd buy some time with that, personally, I live in Angelino Heights. It's a neighborhood that's really wonderful. It's a mixture of duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, single family, multifamily, like 10 units or so. It's a wonderful neighborhood. And if SB 9 can help make all of the neighborhoods as wonderful as Angelino Heights, then I'm all for it. But I think that really requires careful design considerations to go into all these projects. And I think that's the conversation that we might want to start having is with planning tools such as SB 9 or whatever, what ways can we really improve the quality of our communities so that we have more of a mixture of income, we have more complete communities with all types of people forming the neighborhood instead of isolating groups from each other. And so this is something that I would really be interested in learning more about, is those best practices that sort of historically helped create neighborhoods like Angelino Heights. I think that there's a lot of opportunity with planning tools to do that. But any additional thoughts as maybe we'll go back to Casey, who's the chair of the committee?
Yeah, I was gonna say two things. One is that I think I agree with you on both fronts, Will. I think that the work that Tracy, Michael, and Daniel are doing is really important because it's taking the law and sort of seeing how the implementation will actually play out. And I think more of that type of study needs to be done because it's one, we all know how, zoning written is very different than zoning implemented. And the other thing I was going to share was just a personal story as well. I live in Boyle Heights and it's zoned R2, and on my block it's a lot of families that have there's either obviously one or two homes on each of the lots, and my next door neighbor is now he grew up in the house, and now he's building a house behind the house that he grew up in to live in. So that also happened a year or so ago on the opposite side of the street. So to me, the opportunity in SB 9 is that type of opportunity where you have, families having the chance to, live together and become multi-generational families and that type of thing. And also just increasing that sense of community, and also increasing their their equity in the properties that they own. So I would hope that SB 9 could be a tool that could be used in that way.
Thanks, Casey. So Yohai, you have your hand raised. Do you want to add a few more remarks, and then we'll do some closing thoughts with Maria and Jeff?
I just wanted to quickly ask, I guess from you, Will, what Tracy has described with the implementation of SB 9 is extremely important. I mean, as of now, it seems like no lot splits will happen. So do you know of any time frame from the city of when some kind of development standards will come out?
Well, I think that's the $50 million question, and we'll be working with Los Angeles City Planning to clarify that. Jeff and Maria were referring to a motion that's being authored by Councilmember Paul Koretz, that motion will help lend some guidance to how that implementation ordinance will be written. But I think between now and I would say in the next 2 or 3 months, it's time for us as the AIA to really connect with LA City Planning and share our thoughts on how, if SB 9 is a reality, then let's make sure that it's a tool that's beneficial to communities and doesn't harm communities. And I think that's where we, as the architecture community, can help, provide that guidance. Maria and Jeffrey, did you want to have any final thoughts before we?
Well, we just really want to thank you for this evening. We found it exciting to talk to all of you. The City Council, the Planning Department plans on sending out the memorandum on the implementation sometime this week, is what we had heard. Obviously, a lot can be done before they take this to the City Council takes the motion up. So I think it's great that all of you will get involved. I think we want to make sure we protect communities' property and allow homeowners to do things that help them. I just worry that a lot of what this bill does is make it even more enticing for developers to just storm in and get rid of what they don't need and trees and just build. So thank you.
It was a stimulating conversation. I think most of us share Paul's concern that engineers will do this without any thought to any of the community benefits, but everybody else here spoke about developing in a way that would enrich our lives, not demean them. So I thank you all. It was really a terrific time listening to and be part of it. And Rick Corsini, can you give my hellos to Tony? I know him from some Truman Oaks projects. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Tony is the past chair of the AIA Urban Design Committee, and I think they're going to be organizing additional conversations about SB 9. But this is the AIA Government Outreach Committee. We meet on the second Tuesday of every month from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And with that, if you'd like to get more involved with our group, Casey and Tracy are our co-chairs, and Rick Corsini and Hava Danielson are our vice chairs. And we're open for more dialogue. So with that, let's do a round of applause for everybody, and we'll see each other again in a couple weeks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.